Hey, this is Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite games where you can take really as many actions as you possibly can during the course of a round before you choose to pass. This is a weird category. I'm not even sure how I'll title it in the project image or the video image, but we'll find out after I post this video or after I film this video. So the idea in this is that there are certain games where they are based on rounds. So you have a set number of rounds, perhaps, in these games. Typically, I think almost all these have a set number of rounds. But the number of actions you take each round is determined by the number of resources that you have, the amount of income you have, sometimes the number of workers you have, although I generally stayed away from worker placement for this list. Because usually the number of workers you have is the number of actions that you're taking that round. So I stayed away from that for this list. But I have found that I really enjoyed this mechanism. There are a few games that I just absolutely love. In fact, many of the games on this list I really love because I like the idea of or the feeling of eking out one more turn. To give you that one more turn so that you can feel like you have done a little bit more that round than your opponents and worked a little bit more towards the goal that you're trying to achieve. Some honorable mentions for this list that didn't quite make it but were suggested by Stonemaier ambassadors were Eclipse, which I've only played once, but it's a great example of this. I didn't particularly enjoy my overall play of Eclipse due to some other factors, not the idea that you're trying to extend how much you spend each round to extend the number of actions and your play each round. Imperial Settlers, another game that I've only played once. That might be on this list a little bit higher if I played it again. And Stone Age. Stone Age is the one worker placement game that I kind of considered for this list. I don't think, well, there's one other that is on this list. But in Stone Age, it does kind of feel like what I'm describing here because even though you are limited to the number of workers, the number of turns you actually take is very variable each round because you could take all of your workers and place them all on one spot in a single turn, and that's your entire round, or you can kind of place them one by one on different places on the board and stretch out your round and make it a little bit longer. But I didn't quite I felt that was cheating a little bit for this list, so I didn't end up putting Stone Age on this list, even though in terms of how much I enjoy the game, it probably should be on here. An example, actually, I should lead off with an example of all these games. One that I can't put on this list because I am the designer and the publisher is Tapestry. So Tapestry is a game with essentially rounds, even though rounds aren't dictated by, players don't take the rounds in the same pace as the other players, but each player has a set number of rounds that they'll be taking over the course of the game. And in Tapestry, you're gaining income and then trying to spend that income in an optimized way each round, each era for you, so that you can kind of take the most turns. The more turns isn't necessarily better in Tapestry, but it does help if you have more income and can take more turns or have the possibility of taking more turns or taking better turns. And then generally when your resources run out or pretty close to that time, you choose to pass and move on to your next era. So Tapestry is an example that would be on this list if it weren't my design or a Stonemaier game. The number 10 game on this list is Gaia Project, which might horrify some of you. I know Gaia Project is very popular. It is an excellent game, but there just happens to be another game very similar to Gaia Project that is higher on this list that I greatly prefer to Gaia Project. But Gaia Project is a game where there are a set number of rounds in Gaia Project, and you are trying generally to take as many great actions as you can throughout the round. And in Gaia Project, the timing, like many of the games on this list, the timing of when you pass is really important because it can impact turn order. It can impact your income because if you're able to eke out like one more thing to increase your income, then that'll help you for the next round and all subsequent rounds. It's been a long time since I played Gaia Project though because of another game that I play instead, so I won't go into too much detail, but I felt that it deserved to be on this list. So Gaia Project at number 10. At number 9 is another game that I've actually only played once, but I really enjoyed the play of it, and even I watched a little quick refresher video and it made me want to play again, and that is The Networks. This is by Gil Hova at Formal Ferret Games. The Networks is a game about running a TV studio. And there are lots of different things you can do in this game, but basically you are acquiring shows to air for people. There's a bunch of other stuff that you're doing too, but it is one of these games where you are taking actions as long as you can afford to take actions over the course of the round and then deciding when to pass. And similar to a few games on this list, if you are the first player to pass, you receive a bonus for being the first player to pass. So the game actually makes that somewhat tempting to be the first player to pass out of the round because you get more money. But if you stay in the round and can eke out one more turn, you get more actions that can help you over the course of the game. I love that push and pull in these style of games, and the network does that really well, or the networks. At number 8 is a game that I am a little horrified that I've only played once because it was a wonderful game and I need to play it again, finding it hard to get now, and that is Everdell. Everdell is a game where you start off with very few workers. I believe it is a worker placement game. You start with 2 workers, but there are lots of things that you can combo together or activate to be able to get one more turn, so that your turns aren't limited to the number of workers that you're placing, similar to another game that you'll see higher up on this list. I did have to watch some videos on Everdell. This was a big suggestion by my ambassadors for this list, or our ambassadors, still my ambassadors when I proposed that I was going to make this list. But I really need to play it again to refresh myself as to all the different ways that you can eke out one more turn in Everdell before you need to pass to the next round. Everdell is very similar to Tapestry in that players don't end their rounds at the same time. You choose when you want to move to the next season in Everdell. And so I do like that style. I like both styles here. All players take the rounds at the same time, but I slightly prefer how it fits into the flow of the game when you get to decide when your round ends. And Everdell does that really well. I can't wait to play it again. If any of you know where I can get a copy of Everdell, let me know, because I'd love to play it again. Or play it digitally if they're coming out with a digital version. At number 7 on this list is Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is another game where you're getting a lot of income over at the beginning of the round, a lot of money typically, and other resources that you can spend. And the number of turns that you can take each round is determined by how efficiently you spend those resources and what you actually spend the money on. And there are 2 games on this list that have the same mechanism where there is... one of the ways you can play Terraforming Mars is with a draft, where you're choosing which cards to have in your hand. Sometimes it's random. You can also play it randomly, where you just are given a few cards each round, and you need to decide which ones to keep. But the key element here that I really like about Terraforming Mars that plays into this idea of variable number of actions is you have to pay for the cards that you want to keep in your hand. And so this decision is a little agonizing each round because you're trying to see, you know how much money you have, and you're trying to decide, okay, which cards am I going to keep so that I can also play them. And it costs to play these cards too. So there's a cost to keep them and a cost to play them. And you're trying to kind of plan out each turn a little bit as best you can based on how much money you have and that you can actually spend on keeping these cards in your hand. So I really like that idea in Terraforming Mars, and the idea that you can really stretch out your rounds and have it taken a lot of actions if you've built up your income to be able to do that. That's why Terraforming Mars is number 7 on this list. At number 6 is one that actually didn't occur to me to the last minute for this list, and that is The King is Dead. The King is Dead isn't a game about gathering resources or having income or anything like that, but in The King is Dead, you're given 10 action cards at the beginning of the game, and those are the only 10 actions that you can take the entire game. However, you choose when you want to play them. You could play all the action cards, I believe there are 8 rounds, you could play all 10 of your action cards in the first round if you wanted to. You would never win if you did that, but you could do that. And so you have all your actions for the entire game at the beginning of the first round, and you can choose exactly when you want to use them. So there might be rounds where you take no actions and you pass. And passing, you're kind of saying, okay, I'm not going to win the battle that happens this round is not going to go in my favor, or I like the way the board state is right now. I'm going to pass because I don't want it to change. I don't need it to change, so I'm going to pass. Or you can play through these actions, and there might be rounds where you have no actions, other rounds where you have 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 action cards that you're playing, and those cards are out of the game for you. You've used those actions. So I think I'm glad there's a game on this list without resources, because there's no gathering of resources, there's no income, but the King of Dead does this thing where you have control over how many actions you take each round. That does remind me that there are no cooperative games on this list. So maybe it was just tough for me to think about it under the context of cooperation. But if you can think of any cooperative games that does have the round structure somehow, and you're trying to eke out one more turn to move towards victory in a cooperative game, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So that's The King is Dead at number 6. At number 5 is another game that didn't occur to me until the last minute, but I think it does belong here, and that is Parks. So Parks has one of my other favorite mechanisms, which is a one-way action selection track. And you have 2 workers on this track. that you basically you're choosing one worker and moving that worker as far forward on the track as possible to an unoccupied space on that track, and then you're gaining the action. But you can really stretch out those actions. You can slow play that track as much as possible. You can just move one worker one space at a time to get as many possible actions as you can that round. Or you can jump forward to an action that you really want, or a benefit that you really want, or even jump forward to the end of the track, because the end of the track has some tempting stuff that only one player can get if you're the first player to go there. The other nice thing that Parks does in those regards is that basically one player, or in a two-player game, say, one player will be the one that chooses to pass, and they choose to do that essentially by having both of their workers reach the end of the track. But when they do that, it puts the pressure on the other player because they then have to advance to the end of the track. So I can't just jump forward, or I can't slow play it the entire way, even though the other player isn't taking any actions anymore. So arguably, I don't know if Parks should exactly be on this list, but it does feel like a game where you're kind of eking out one more thing this round. The reason that I'm wondering if it shouldn't be on this list is because the number of actions you take, while it is variable, is also dependent on what the other player does. So there's some nice player interaction there, but I don't know if it entirely fits into this category of you have control over how many actions you're taking each round. But still, I thought it was close enough, and so I put Parks on this list at number 5. At number 4 on this list is also my number 4 game of 2020, and that is The Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is the other worker placement game on this list. You only have 2 workers that you can place, but a huge part of this game is that the actions that you can take extend well beyond the workers that you have. So one of the actions you can take is you can buy cards. One of the actions you can take is that you can advance on the research track in one of 2 different ways, really. There's a research track, and you have 2 different tokens on that track. And there are a few other actions that you can take over the course of each round. But it is really that style of game where you're trying to eke out one more action. You're trying to use the resources you have to maybe get one more card into your hand, because each card has a resource on it or an ability on it. Or you're trying to find a way to get one of your workers back off the board if you have a special card that you can do that. Or you're trying to spend one extra action and get an artifact card, because an artifact card gives you a benefit right away. Or if you move up on the research track at the right time, that might give you one more resource to allow you to go exploring one more time. So it really gives me that feeling of, can I do one more thing and extend this round for myself just a little bit further to get a few more actions. I'm not very good at that yet with Arnak. I haven't even come close to winning this game yet, but I have really enjoyed it at 4 players and 2 players because of that one more turn element. So I really like that aspect of Arnak. And unlike many of these games on this list, Arnak does not have a benefit for passing. When you pass, you're just out of that round for a little while until the other players finish. I have a few other topics that I'm going to cover. Let's see if I can cover these as related to these final few games. Number 3, Clans of Caledonia. This is actually somewhat similar to the networks in that when you pass in Clans of Caledonia, you get a pretty big monetary bonus based on which order you passed. But Clans of Caledonia is kind of the landmark version of these games, because there are lots of different resources in Clans of Caledonia, but the one really big one each round is money. How much money you have. Everything costs money. Every action you take in Clans of Caledonia requires money. And so the money that you spend determines how many actions you're going to take. So if you have if you earn a lot of money, you can take more actions generally, but it also means you can take better actions, more powerful actions. You can buy better buildings and put them on the board. You can have more flexibility as to which of the territories on the board you can buy into. You can put something on it, because each of the territories has a monetary cost on it. But this is actually the game that made me first think of this list, because I've been playing Clans of Caledonia on Board Game Arena, and I just love that feeling of getting a lot of, like, starting each round with a ton of money and seeing how much you can do with all that money, how many actions you could take. And sometimes it's surprising how few actions you take, is because maybe I spend that money on really expensive stuff. And sometimes it feels really good, even though I maybe don't have the highest income, to be able to stretch out those turns and get one more turn, maybe sell something at the right time in the market to get a little bit more money so I can take another 2 actions. And it has that really nice balance of, like, I think sometimes in these games, it can lead to some analysis paralysis where you're trying to plan out multiple turns ahead, because if you go down this path, then you have enough resources to do one thing, but then you think, okay, but if I go down this path and then do this and then do that, then I can take that one extra action 4 turns from now. But in clans, it feels pretty flexible because you just have this one big resource of money, and you have a fairly large amount of that throughout the game. And so it doesn't feel as agonizing until you get down to like the last maybe $20 each round. So I think it works really well in those regards. Definitely top 3. Could have been higher on this list. Very close to being higher. Clans of Caledonia at number 3. At number 2 on the list is a game that I just played yesterday. Not for the first time. This is one of my favorite games of 2020. One that I played a number of times. And that is the Isle of Cats. This is another one that really got me thinking about this list, because in the Isle of Cats, every round, all players get 20 fish. So all players have the same amount of the core resource in the game, fish, to spend, but there are other ways to get fish as well through the cards that you draft. And each round in the Isle of Cats, you have a few different things you can do. But mostly you are just catching cats in a friendly way, and bringing those cats onto your boat where they can stretch out and lay in the sun. And the number of times you can do this, number of cats that you can get, is dependent partially on the number of fish that you have and the number of baskets that you have to actually catch these cats. And so there are somewhat hard limitations, especially with the baskets, as to how many cats you can catch. But it does feel like one of these games where you kind of decide how much you want to stretch out those resources. Do you go after cheaper cats so you can have more actions over that round? Do you go after more expensive cats because you need these polyomino tiles to fit into certain spaces on your board? That's a tough decision to make in the game. And you also, similar to Terraforming Mars, you're making this decision, or parts of these decisions, as you are drafting cards, because the cards that you draft each have a cost on them, and if you want to keep those cards, you have to pay the cost in the upper left-hand corner of those cards, again, in fish. And so even during the beginning of round draft, you are already thinking about, okay, how much can I afford to spend on these cards, which are all good, so that I can still have enough fish to spend on the cats that I want to get this round and add to my boat. The other thing that I really like about this decision point is that you get to carry over your extra fish from round to round. The fish don't go bad. This is similar to Clans of Caledonia as well. So there are a few of these games. Actually, I don't know if any of these games. Well, no, there are some. Like in Arnak, your cards are no, they're not. Okay, maybe this is a commonality with many of these games, that you do get to carry over those resources from round to round, which opens up the decision space even more, because now you're deciding, okay, maybe I've done enough for this round. I think I've done enough. I'm going to pass. I'm going to get whatever the pass benefit is, and I'll save these resources for the next round. That feels really good, rather than punishing players for not using all their resources every round. So that feels really good, and that's what I really love about the Isle of Cats. The number 1 game on this list, though, is one that I played probably almost more than any other game that I've ever played, and that is Terra Mystica. I've played mostly this past year on Board Game Arena, but I've played plenty of times on my friend Adam's copy of Terra Mystica, and I absolutely love this game. This is a classic game for this format that I'm describing today, where in Terra Mystica you are getting a lot of income each round, and you are improving the ways that you get income each round. And how you spend those resources depends on how long your round can last. At a certain point, you're probably just going to run out of resources, and then you'll pass. You don't have to, and you do get to carry over resources from round to round, but generally you kind of try to eke out a little bit more because you improve your income for the next round based on those resources. In classic Terra Mystica, there isn't a huge pass benefit, other than you being the first one to choose one of the tiles that's available. There are these bonus tiles that you get if you are the first to pass, or based on pass order. In one of the expansions, they added another mechanism that I thought fit pretty well into this format, which is that the order in which players pass determines the player order for the next round. And I believe a few of the games on this list have that. And that's a tough thing to do. I think it's a good addition in Terraforming Mars. The only trouble with that, and this goes back to a video I made about player order, turn order in games, is that I think it's a little bit more intuitive for the flow of the game to just have clockwise turn order in a game like this. But in games where like the first player is pretty crucial, like that decision of being the first player is pretty crucial, it can be a little bit better to have it not just be about the first player, but also about the order in which every player passes. So I am on board with that sort of player order, turn order in games like this, where the time that you pass really matters for the game. But I love Terra Mystica. I love so much more about it than just this mechanism of eking out one more turn and optimizing your turns during each round with variable numbers of turns per players. But I just overall love Terra Mystica and have a lot of fun with it and wanted to put it at number 1 on this list. This obviously is a hard category to search for. I don't think there's a name for this mechanism, or maybe there is that I'm not thinking of, but I had to lean on our ambassadors and lean on my list of games that I love to try to find some of these games. So I'm guessing that you will have some great suggestions that didn't even occur to me, that are maybe even well outside the games that I mentioned here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you could think of any other games that have some sort of round structure, where each player has a variable number of turns they can take during the round, that has choices like how much income they're getting, choices based on passing, choices based on how they're able to eke out one more turn and use their resources. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about that. Thanks.